What We Pretend We Can't See by Gyzym. Read by Alex Mabella. Chapter 10. Harry doesn't sleep much that morning. He should, he knows he needs it, and he tries for a while after he calls in sick to work, first in a room right across from the one he stuck Draco in, and then in the room he slept in back when this was his home. It looks nothing like it did when he was 17, and for the first time since he set foot in the museum Harry wishes a little for the dusty old halls of the place as she once was. He thinks it might actually be easier to fall asleep if everything around him was crushingly depressing, instead of bright and clean and reminding him of Draco. God, he's in love with Draco. Harry's so stupid. He can't believe he's let this happen, and without his even noticing. And that, Harry thinks, is the most horrifying part. At least twice a year since he was 14, Harry's had the same nightmare, where he's tied to a flagpole in the middle of Privet Drive, trying frantically to dodge a basilisk wearing Voldemort's face, as from the ground Mad-Eye Moody shrieks, "Constant vigilance, Potter!" at the top of his lungs. Sometimes the flagpole is the statue at the Department of Mysteries. Sometimes the basilisk is a lake full of inferi. Sometimes it's not Mad-Eye, but Sirius or Dumbledore, or little Teddy Lupin, one particularly rough time Harry doesn't like to think about. But the message is always the same. Constant vigilance, Potter. Constant vigilance or die. Which is why Harry thinks a little hysterically it's particularly mind-numbingly horrible that he's found himself in this beast of a spot. He's supposed to be aware of his surroundings. He's supposed to be abreast of the situation. He's not supposed to be in love with Draco Malfoy, accidentally but irretrievably, and not notice it happening until it's too late to do a damn thing about it. He throws his hands a little in the air as he thinks this, and then recognizes he's laying flat on his back in a bed, waving his hands around like a crazy person, and goes downstairs to pace. In the end, he walks the whole house. He walks the storeroom, its endless soothing shelves. He walks the museum, reading the little placards next to the exhibits. He walks Draco's private floors, careful to creep on light feet past Draco's door. He even goes up to the attic to see Vicky, who seems to be snoozing and throws only one seatpot at him, only half-heartedly, before settling down into an innocent-looking pile of wines. Harry goes back downstairs. He sits on the couch in the first-floor parlor. He puts his head in his hands and tries to tell himself that it'll be fine. There's just the pressure and intensity of the last 12 hours playing tricks on him, and he's not in love with Draco at all. He even tries to tell himself that he's a savior complex in ill-fitting trousers, and this is all nothing more than an outcropping of his twisted desire to save someone because Gryffindor children aren't socialized properly, and then realizes he's trying to talk himself out of being in love with Draco in Draco's voice. He has a bit of a hysterical fit at this point, muffling his not at all pleasant laughter into a throw pillow, and he must fall asleep somewhere in the middle there because he wakes up to the sound of knocking on the front door. He blinks, heavy-lidded, sore-muscled exhaustion letting him know that he didn't sleep nearly long enough, not more than an hour or two. Then he remembers that Draco's upstairs and needs to sleep a lot more than he does, and he drags himself warily off the couch to meet Kreacher at the door.
Kreacher was not sure if Master Draco and Harry Potter would want him to answer it in the circumstances,
he tells Harry in a nervous squeak.
"Kreacher's sorry for making us wait."
"It's okay, Kreacher. I've got it," Harry says. He's assuming it's just museum guests or something, that he'll just tell them to come back tomorrow and go back to sleep. So it's a nasty surprise to open the door to Blaise Zabini and a short Asian woman with close-cropped hair who Harry's fairly certain is Pansy Parkinson. Harry says, and then, 'cause what the hell else is he supposed to do at... Hello?
"Oh my God, it's true,"
Pansy says and rounds on Blaise.
"I thought you were having me on. Why didn't you tell me you weren't having me on?"
Blaise shrugs, his eyes dancing. "I did, Pans. You wouldn't believe me. You never do." To Harry, in a conspiratorial tone, he adds, "Draco and I played one trick too many on her as children. You see, she just wasn't up to playing with the big boys, and it scarred her. She may never trust again. It's all very tragic."
I want you to remember you said that, Pansy tells him sweetly. When I spell off your eyebrows again, Blaze, may the phrase "she just wasn't up to playing with the big boys" bring you comfort in their absence.
Oh, you wouldn't, Blaze says. He's laughing, but he touches a fingertip to one of his eyebrows a little nervously anyway, and she smirks. Seeming to decide that he's through with her for the moment, Blaze turns to Harry. In a tone that Harry suspects means he is being mocked, he says, "So, what are you, Draco's doorman now?" Says Harry again. "No?" Tries to think of some way to explain his presence that isn't, "I volunteered to stay here indefinitely because, as it turns out, I'm desperately in love with Draco. Oops, sorry, bloody shocking for me too." And comes up with, "I'm just keeping an eye on things."
I told you Draco was still in St. Mungo's,
Pansy exclaims and hits Blaze in the arm with her handbag.
I told you. You were all, "Oh, my intel says he was treated and discharged. It's perfectly fine to wait until nearly 2 in the afternoon to drop by and see how he's doing." Man, we've dithered about all morning while he's clinging to life alone in a hospital bed.
Says Harry for the 3rd time in as many minutes. He's having a lot of trouble stringing thoughts together. "No, he's upstairs. Sleeping, it was." Harry stops, yawns hugely, and finishes. "A really long night."
"We heard,"
Pansy says, fixing Harry with a murderous look. "Well, I heard," Blaze amends. "And then I made a horrific mistake of telling this one, thinking she could perhaps remain calm for long enough to—"
"Oh, I remained calm the last time, and look what good that did me."
Pansy snaps. She pulls past Harry into the house, apparently sharing Draco's "I know the rules of etiquette, and therefore it's perfectly acceptable for me to break them" attitude.
"Stay in Cairo, Pansy," you said. "I've got this all perfectly handled, Pansy," you said, "and he was treated for internal bleeding last night."
"No, he wasn't," Harry says. "It was bruising, I'm pretty sure. One of his kidneys, a couple of his ribs." He crossed his arms over his chest, rubbed them a little with his palms, and adds, more defensively than is probably wise, "He is okay now." Liz and Pansy turn identical, incredulous looks on him. Harry sort of wants to die.
"Blaze, are you coming or not?"
Pansy demands, having apparently determined that Harry is obsolete to the whole entering the house process.
"Because I'll leave you down here with Potter if I have to, but I'm going up."
Says Harry, who is starting to suspect that it's all he can say. "Sorry, no." Pansy whips her head around to stare at him and then stalks across the hall until they're inches apart. It's a familiar move, one of Draco's, but when Draco does it, he winds up looking down at Harry a little. Harry's got about half a foot on Pansy, so her version isn't quite as effective. She does, however, change it up with the added element of a jab from her nails, which are all filed into long points and painted a deep gunmetal grey.
"No,"
she demands, like the word is very offensive. Harry wonders if maybe there's some sort of emphasis on dramatics that the Sorting Hat seeks out for the Slytherin house. Then he remembers that the Sorting Hat wanted to put him in Slytherin and promptly benches the entire thought process. "No," he repeats to Pansy. When she continues to glare at him, he gives her a little shrug. It's trying for apologetic, but Harry's not sure he does that great of a job. "Like I said, he's asleep. You can, He pauses and casts around, trying to come up with anything else to suggest, before he sighs and offers, "Wait down here if you like." Instead of seeming mollified at this perfectly reasonable offer, Pansy looks like she wants to rip Harry's spinal column out and beat him with it.
"You!"
she spits furiously.
"Do not get to decide whether or not we can wait. You do not get to decide whether or not we go up and see him in the first place. I mean, who exactly do you think you are?"
Harry blinks at her. He's too tired for this. No, Pansy," Blaze says in a soothing tone. "I know being unnecessarily aggressive keeps you young. I do, but Harry's made some perfectly rational points, haven't you, Harry?" He doesn't wait for Harry to answer, just breezes right on ahead. "And since it would actually be quite a terrible idea to go wake Draco up, why don't we just have a nice little sit-down in the parlour, Relax in the manner to which you were once accustomed. Doesn't that sound nice?
Uh-huh,
Pansy says. She takes off her black leather jacket and drops it in Harry's hand. Harry stares at it in mute confusion and vague offense.
Fine, but I'll need to stop you using that terrible unspeakable voice on me. It's so demeaning. I've known you since you were 4. I'm aware when you're manipulating me.
Doing a lot of that at 4, was I? Blaise says, amused, and follows her clacking black heels into the sitting room. Harry doesn't bother straining to hear her reply. Creature peeks his head out from behind the banister.
Harry Potter?
He whispers. Harry sighs.
Yeah, Creature.
Creature could take care of tea for Master Draco's guest.
Creature whispers in an entreating little voice. He sidles up to Harry, blinking up at him with big eyes.
Master Draco's guest can sometimes be very difficult. Harry Potter would probably do best to let Creature handle it.
Creature, Harry says with feeling. Thank Merlin for you, please. Yes, God, what do I do with that coat?
Creature will take the coat, Harry Potter.
Creature says and gives Harry a fun little pat as he does. He looks a bit nervous.
Harry Potter should just do his best, okay?
He vanishes, and Harry spends a dark moment alone in the hall thinking that even Creature knows that Harry is in over his head, and maybe he should just give this all up for a bad job and run screaming out into the afternoon sunlight. Then he remembers all over again about the whole love situation, and once he gets done grimacing at the floor over the horror of it all, he decides he's going to have to learn to deal with these people to even have a chance with Draco. Which he doesn't, of course, and probably never will, and honestly, the whole idea is pretty absurd anyway, since nobody ends up settling down with someone who once signed a blood oath not to eat meals with them on pain of burning entrails. It's an insane, crazy idea, and Harry is insane and crazy for having it. And if he was smart, if he had any self-preservation instinct at all, he would run screaming out the door and never look back for a moment. He sighs. He goes into the parlor.
Good, you're still here,
Pansy says, rolling her eyes. And it's just, she's sitting in the same spot Draco was when, more than a month ago, he said those exact words to Harry, that very first day. It's like Harry can see that whole moment superimposed over him and Draco staring daggers at each other over the wreckage of the room, and he wants to reach out and slap the past version of himself, demand that he sit up and pay attention, and not comprehensively screw over his future self with this stupid distractibility and refusal to interact with his emotions until they blow up in his face like this. God, Harry's really tired. Yes, he says, collapsing into the nearest chair. I'm still here. I'm staying here for a while, until this all gets, whatever, sorted.
What? As a live-in aura?
Pansy looks at Blaise, a sour expression on her face.
Then you know about this?
I don't think the auras know about this, Pansy, Blaise says and smiles at Harry. There is a quality to it that makes Harry feel vaguely queasy. As of 11 o'clock this morning, the last that DMLE has on Harry Potter is that he's out on a sick day and expected to return to work tomorrow. You know that's creepy, right? Harry says, pressing the heel of his hands against his forehead to ward off an impending headache. When Blaise just nods cheerfully, unperturbed, Harry dobs his hand, since it's obviously not going to be any help. Well, great, as long as you know.
So you're just...
Pansy says, turning incredulous eyes on Harry.
Volunteering your time, then, to protect Draco? Draco Malfoy, who you tormented mercilessly all through school?
Hey, Harry snaps. Oh, I did not. Well, it was mutual tormenting, and Draco started most of it.
Then you just call him Draco?
Pansy says, her eyes wide with horror.
Blaise, come on, it's too mean. I'll leave your eyebrows alone if you just call it off now. I'm honestly not sure I can take it.
Not a trick, Blaise says again, smiling winsomely at her. Not that I'd change it if I could, of course. It's basically street theatre.
I'm not dignifying that with a response,
Pansy says and sits back in her chair with her arms crossed. Creature peers with a crack into the ensuing silence. He brings tea over to Blaise and to Pansy, before he places a cup at Harry's elbows and whispers,
"It does not look like it's going very well, Harry Potter."
"Oh, good eye, creature," Harry tells him warily. He thinks he hears a snort of laughter from Blaise, but he doesn't have the heart to look over and find out. Creature vanishes again, and Harry, slightly nettled by his comment, decides to try to make small talk. It's got to be better than sitting here being glared and or laughed at, and also, if he doesn't do something soon, he's going to fall asleep in this chair, and he doubts that will go over well. With Pansy, anyway, he's starting to think everything goes over well with Blaise, in the sense that he finds it deeply entertaining, and that's all he really cares about. "So," Harry says, striking out bravely, "Pansy, you live in Cairo?" Pansy rolls her eyes over a teacup, but she does at least deign to answer the question. "I live all over. I'm a curse breaker." "Oh," Harry says. He'd considered that line of work at one point himself, until he sat down with Bill and went over how much math and analytics and other stuff Harry couldn't be bothered about was actually involved. "That's supposed to be quite an interesting job. How'd you, find yourself in that line of work?" Pansy raises her eyebrows, then, slowly, she leans forward, this menacing little trick of body language that Harry does not enjoy at all. "Well, Potter, when I was about 17, a genocidal maniac broke into my school and said he'd kill everyone if we didn't turn over this one boy. He was a classmate, you know, that boy who'd always been pretty horrible to my friends and me, and I nearly murdered one of them to boot. So I thought, well, maybe I'll put it out there that his one life is probably not worth all the others, and perhaps we should consider giving him over before the maniac starts slaughtering 12-year-olds for sport." He gives Harry a filthy look and adds, "I'm not saying it was a proud moment or anything, but I thought the resulting ostracism was a bit harsh in the circumstances. I didn't enjoy it, so I found a job traveling to places where nobody knew that particular story and where, God willing, I never have to look that boy in the face ever again." She looks Harry up and down. "Unfortunately, life does seem to come along with these little disappointments." Harry says, wishing badly that he hadn't asked. "Is that all he says?" Pansy demands of Blaise. "Is he actually a functional illiterate? I thought that was just one of Draco's mad childhood theories." Harry is saved from having to defend his literacy by the sound of footsteps on the floor overhead. They all fall silent, glancing up towards the ceiling, as the footsteps proceed across the hall above them and onto the staircase. Then Draco calls, "I sincerely hope you're making me breakfast, Potter, wherever you are. I've been through a traumatic ordeal. It would be shirking your duties as an agent of justice to deny me some sausages." Draco trails off, having reached the doors of the parlor and discovered Harry, Pansy, and Blaise sitting therein. He's rumpled, clearly just awake, but he looks so much healthier than he did last night that Harry's heart twists in his chest and then kind of stays that way, each beat painful and too hard. He wonders if this is just what looking at Draco is going to be like now, all agonized, hopeless, longing, or if maybe it will get easier over time and Harry can work his way back around to not noticing it very much. Horrifically, he's not sure which way he wants that one to go. Just at this moment, Draco is giving him a slightly panicked look, which Harry returns with interest. He knows why he's panicking, but as for Draco, he hasn't got the faintest idea. They're his friends, after all. He should know how to deal with them. "Pansy," Draco says after a long pause. "Blaise, hello, I see you found Potter." "It's a trick," Pansy says. "I know it is, it has to be. It's the only explanation that makes sense." "We broke his spirit when you were young," Draco tells her. Seeming to regain his equilibrium, he flicks a quicksilver grin at Blaise before he turns an expression of mocking concern back on Pansy. "It's not your fault. You were only a child." "I don't know why I even cared at your life," Pansy says, and sounds like she means it for all of 3 seconds before she gets up off the couch and throws her arm around Draco in a massive, vaguely alarming hug. Draco pats her on the back for a few times, looking torn between being surprised and gratified. Harry takes this as his cue to go. He's not sure what happens when an interloper is caught viewing genuine affection between Slytherins, but in his current mental state he can't help but think it might involve death by firing squad or something. He says,
I'm just gonna...
and ducks out and down the hall to the kitchen before anyone can stop him. Not that anyone would, but just in case. He's drumming his fingers against the countertop, trying to decide what he's going to cook, when Draco says, "Oh my God, I knew it!" from just behind him. Harry turns and blinks at him. The cut on his cheek looks less angry now. His hair is loose and his eyes are warm. Harry is so stupid.
"What did you know?"
he says. "I knew you," Draco says and rolls his eyes, "were actually coming in here to produce breakfast. You nitwit, go to bed. You look unwell."
"What?" Harry says. "You said..."
"Yes, well, that was making the assumption you slept," Draco said, "which you obviously didn't and which is on me. I must have allowed my expectations to raise to basic human functionality again. Silly, a rookie mistake." He gives Harry a dark look. "When I agreed to let you stay here, I didn't mean awake every minute of the day, stumbling about looking consumptive and unsettling my house guests. Go sleep. I'll awaken you if there's a crime."
"They're more unsettling than I am,"
Harry mutters, because he feels in his heart that it's true. Draco openly laughs at him. "Oh, Potter," he says, as though Harry is a very amusing dog who has just done an entertaining trick, and walks off back towards the parlor. Harry tells himself as he climbs the stairs back to his old bedroom that there is no reason to love such an obnoxious little git anyway. And that Draco is condescending and insulting and has terrible tastes in friends. That what would really make Harry happy is someone friendly and likable, and without any childhood grudges, who never bosses him around or calls him names or laughs in his face like an asshole. He doesn't believe a word, though, and he falls asleep knowing it. It's nearly dark when Harry wakes up. He stretches, groans, and drags himself out of bed. He's got things to do, however much he might like to lay here and let the world drift away again. Sleep hasn't done him the kindness of scrubbing his feelings for Draco out of his mind, but he didn't really expect it to, and he decides that he's just going to put it aside for the moment. Deal with it when it comes up. Draco's not in the house, which is a small mercy. Reacher tells Harry that Draco told him to say he was going out and hadn't been kidnapped, and that Harry should refrain from doing anything insane in his absence. So Harry goes back to his own place to pack up some of his stuff, take a shower. His ancient old shower head hisses and spits, and Harry finds himself reaching through the shower curtain for his wand, annoyed, and casting a couple of restoration spells he learned when he and Draco were fixing up the museum the first time. It helps, and Harry pats himself down with a towel afterwards, wondering why he never bothered to do anything about it before, wondering if he's just been here all this year quietly and systematically ignoring things that were bothering him when he could have fixed them with just a little attention. He stands in his living room for a few minutes, towel slung around his waist, dripping on the already warped wood floors, and for the first time sees what Draco must see when he comes here. This place is horrible. It's cold, and it's dark, and there are large discolored patches of the walls from mold and water damage. Half his appliances barely work. He can hear vicious row playing out between his next-door neighbors, the sound so familiar that it's essentially become white noise. Harry wouldn't be ashamed to live here if it was all he could afford. God knows he's lived with worse, but it isn't by a wide margin, and wasn't even when he bought it. He could live in a place cleaner and more comfortable and better maintained than this one on his Aura salary alone, forgetting the money he inherited from his parents and a largely untouched payment he accepted from Grimmauld Place 7 years ago. And Harry is, he realizes, ashamed to live here. That's why he never has Ron or Hermione over. That's why he's never hosted a dinner party or even a birthday party or a smaller, less horrible alternative to the pub nights. He doesn't want the people in his life to come here and see this, Harry's unchanging grotto of privacy, how little he cares for the things that are just for himself. He's had 7 years with this place. It doesn't have to be what it is. Harry could have fixed it up in a dozen ways if he was determined to keep the space itself for location or whatever other reason, but he just didn't. It just never seemed that important. "Sorry," he says to the empty room, even though this is a muggle apartment in a muggle structure and almost certainly can't hear him or care. "I'll do better when I come back," or, he adds, thinking of Grimmauld Place's open, airy sprawl about how these days it doesn't look like it could belong to anyone but Draco. "I'll find someone better who can." He gets dressed, picks up some clothes, shoes, and toiletries, and then grabs his invisibility cloak, his broom, and a Malfoy case file. They've been sitting next to his armchair for a month, so heavily, fruitlessly poured over that most of the edges are dog-eared, and Harry feels a thick rush of guilt as he hefts the box under one arm. He should have solved this already. It's his fault everything's happened. If he were just a better Auror, this whole thing would never have played out. But that, Harry remembers, is not productive. He swallows it down, throws his belongings into a duffel bag, and goes to St. Mungo's. Hermione's in rare and terrifying form when he gets there. 17 open files on her bed, and a container of Chinese food in one hand as she bosses two assistants around. She says hello to Harry and then shoos him out almost immediately, so Harry and Ron take Rose for a walk around the grounds outside. Harry's quiet, caught up in his thoughts, so he startles a little when he glances to his left and realizes Ron is giving him a measuring look. "You all right, Harry?" he says.
"Sure," Harry says. "Just thinking."
"Okay," Ron says gamely. "Thinking that's always a good thing to do." He pauses and then, uncomfortable, adds, "Here if you need to talk about anything, though. If you ever do, I mean. Even if it's, well, whatever it is, you can talk to me." Harry feels a surge of sharp affection for his straightforward, easygoing friends who don't ever come across as trying to embarrass him for their own amusement or give the suggestion that they're covered in invisible spikes. But then he feels one for Draco, too, at the thought of how he weathered all the Weasleys last night, long after he could have gone home. They might seem straightforward and easygoing to Harry, but he's sure that to Draco, Pansy and Blaise seem... Well, no, he can't imagine Pansy and Blaise being defined in either of those ways by anyone. Still, though, it was a nice thing Draco did. Especially nice, even seeing as it's Draco. "Thanks, Ron," Harry says, and means it, but doesn't take him up on his offer. He goes back instead to number 12. Draco hasn't returned, and Harry's hungry, so he makes dinner. That French dish with the wine he can never remember the name of, but thinks of privately as, "Fuck you, Uncle Vernon chicken." It's not bad, and he eats a heartily helping, washing it down with a glass of wine he used in cooking with. When Draco still isn't back after he does the washing up, after he starts to do the washing up and Creature lets out a war cry and starts slapping and poking at him until he steps aside and allows the professional his work, he starts to worry a little. It is, Harry realizes quickly, a lot more horrible to worry about Draco now that he fully understands why the worry is happening, and he only lasts about 20 minutes before he decides it's either act or lose his mind. He has a pretty good idea of where Draco might be once he really thinks about it, and it doesn't take long for Creature to help him track down a few things, to grab his scarf and jacket from the pile of stuff on his bed that he brought over from his apartment. He's on the street corner in Muggle London, not 15 minutes after he decided to go, staring a little despairingly at the spot where the portal to the glen should be. "Probably only stays open for you if you actually see it open," Harry mutters. He knew that was a possibility, but he hoped, oh well, no getting around it now. Harry looks over both shoulders, sighs heavily, and makes an attempt at the fish to the ocean gesture Draco pulled the other night. It does nothing except make Harry feel very foolish, and when he tries again, all that happens is that someone across the street yells, "Shake it, baby!" and does a little wolf whistle. He tries a third time, figuring that if this fails, he'd just go back to Grimmauld Place and deal with the indignity of sitting around fretting instead of the much more immediate indignity of being stared at by a laughing Muggle stranger. But this time it works. The portal opens, and Harry strides through it quickly, looking around. From a distance, he can see Draco's white blonde head in the moonlight. Sitting on the bridge, his legs dangling over the edge, throwing pebbles. Harry walks the little path down. "You see," Draco says without looking around when Harry gets close. "This is the problem with telling someone where your secret lair is. It's really a very significant flaw." "I can go," Harry offers, even though he doesn't really want to.
If you want to be alone or whatever.
No, why would I come here if I wanted to be alone? Draco's voice is bitingly sarcastic, and Harry slumps a little. This was stupid. Love is stupid, and it makes people stupid. Should have stayed at the house and left well enough alone.
Right, he says, shifting uncomfortably. I'll just...
He jerks a thumb over his shoulder, not that Draco's looking at him, and turns around, starts walking back up the path.
Oh, for God's sake, Potter!
Draco calls after him. Harry turns. Draco's jumped down from the bridge and is standing next to it, hands on his hips, eyebrows up.
Oh, I was joking. What's gotten into you?
Well, since you mentioned it, it turns out I'm madly in love with you, and I'm not handling it very well. Harry does not say. Instead, he shrugs and walks over to lean with his back against the bridge.
I don't know. Weird day, I guess.
Well, there's that. Draco turns back out towards the water, his mouth pulling into a tight little line. Harry notes distantly that they're in the reverse of the positions they were the other night, and Draco poked and prodded all his balled-up emotions out of his chest and wonders if he's supposed to return the favor or not. If it was a favor, that is. Harry is still not totally sure. He's pretty sure, though. He sighs.
Did it, not go well with Pansy and Blaze or something?
Draco glances at him, startled. Then he lets out a brief bark of laughter.
Dear God, I've created a monster. Is it so much to ask that you just stand there in your usual stoic silence, maybe making the occasional pithy comment? I mean, honestly.
Harry rolls his eyes.
I do not stand in stoic silence, Malfoy.
That's actually a little distressing, Draco says, though his voice is light.
That you don't know that you do it, I mean. Next you'll be telling me that your hair is like that on purpose and you've never said, in your life.
Harry says and then scowls when Draco smirks.
Yay, shut up.
There it is, Draco says cheerfully.
Now, wait for it. You'll sulk in a minute, and then you'll forget that you're sulking and just stare broodily out into the night like you alone carry the world's troubles. I've seen you do it 1,000 times. In many ways, Potter, you're actually very predictable.
Harry opens his mouth, shuts it again, and then, hating himself for it, does actually look out at the water in sulky silence. Because whatever. Because he feels like it. Because Draco can predict Harry's stupid moods better than Harry can, but he can't see that Harry's heart beats faster in his chest every time Draco so much as turns his head, and it's too much. On top of all that, to be expected to say something. It takes a minute for Draco to stop laughing at him, but then, in a conciliatory tone, he says,
It went fine with Pansy and Blaze.
Harry shoots him a questioning sidelong glance, but doesn't say anything that could be latched onto and used as a distraction. Draco, Harry thinks with a vicious little twist of satisfaction, is in many ways very predictable himself.
Draco rolls his eyes. Oh, for the love of... If you must know, yes, fine, it wasn't the best afternoon we've ever passed. They're just a bit...
Trails off, whips a pebble out onto the water, and sighs.
Blaze inherited the Sabini estate when he was 14. His mother, you know, she didn't want the place to end up with some spurned husband by mistake. And Pansy, well, Pansy had a really hard time after the war.
She's sad, Harry says quietly. He's been thinking about it all afternoon.
For what it's worth.
Oh, don't, Draco says, holding up a hand and fixing Harry with a fierce scowl.
Whatever you're going to say, Merlin, I can just imagine it. But Malfoy, I too feel I should have been served up to the Dark Lord on a platter to save the lives of school children. You are personally responsible for all the consequences of every decision ever made in the history of the world, Potter, I know. But nobody thinks that, even Pansy doesn't think that, and this isn't about that anyway, so just spare me, all right?
Harry says, nonplussed. He'd only been going to say he was sorry for her trouble, even if that thought Draco laid out as a hypothetical maybe did cross his mind today once or twice.
All right.
Good, Draco snaps, and turns his gaze back to the water. When he speaks again, he sounds calmer.
The point is, anyway, it was hard for Pansy. Well, it was hard for all of us, but especially for her and me. I'd been right in the center of things, acquittal or no, and she'd said what she said, the way that she said it.
He shrugs a little. The movement is brittle, and Harry wrestles with the insane urge to try and reach out and pat him or something. Touch him somehow.
We dealt with it in different ways. I decided to stay and learn and try to be someone better, I suppose. I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I grew up and became someone else, the world would forget what I'd done. I wasn't totally right. There are some people for whom some situations in which I'll always be who I was at 17. And that's all right. That's the price. Most of the time my life is better than I ever expected it to be, better than I probably deserve.
Draco sighs again, drumming his fingers against the stone.
Pansy left.
Sometimes people run from things they don't know how to handle, Harry says, knowing the truth of it all too well.
Oh, I know that,
Draco snaps. He throws all his remaining pebbles into the water hard, as he says,
I'm not angry with her. She can do what she likes, but neither one of them really understands what it is to make something, you know, to pour yourself into changing something the way I did with that house, the way I did with myself.
He scowls down at his empty hands and abruptly says,
They want me to leave.
They what? Harry says, heart rate picking up.
To go where?
Blazes, Draco says. Still looking at his hands, his voice flat.
Or the old Parkinson estate, or Meffrey Manor. Pansy thinks I should go with her to Cairo. She's sure it's some crazed maniac trying to enact vengeance on my father through me, like that thing with the Dolohov boy a few years ago.
We looked into that, though, Harry says, voice admirably even, given the way his mind is screaming. He's leaving. He's going to Egypt and never coming back. Grab him while you still can and run for the hills. I must have run down a dozen leads on the Lucius revenge angle. Everything came up clean.
I told her that,
Draco says, throwing his hands up a little.
And she tried to bribe me with the access to an upcoming archaeology dig. They both think I'm being, willfully stubborn, and that an old house that isn't even my ancestral home isn't worth dying for.
You're not going to die, Harry says. It comes out as more of a growl.
Oh, well, Draco says, all dark amusement. In that case, I suppose I'll just owl them that there's nothing to worry about, and they got their knickers all in a twist for nothing.
Harry doesn't say anything to that. Just stares out at the glen in muted dread, wondering what the fuck he's supposed to do now. Draco needs to be safe. If Draco wants to leave and Harry talks him out of it and he dies, it'll kill Harry too. He'll want it to, but he doesn't want Draco to be run out of Grimmauld Place, not when he's worked so hard for it and loved it so well, not when he's proved himself the type of person who doesn't run out on much of anything at all. He doesn't want Draco to move to Cairo or even Wiltshire. He'd be leaving behind too much, the wet bar and the storeroom and Vicky and Creature and Harry. Fuck it all. You're not going to do it, are you? Harry says. It's not what he means to say. He means to say, what do you think you're going to do? Or have you given it any thought? Or something like that. A non-committal and non-pressuring option. But instead, he said this. The only small victory of the whole experience that his voice does come out non-committal, so it's a statement, not a question, which doesn't make him look quite so 12-year-old. It's still not great, though. But then Draco turns to stare at him, and Harry draws in a deep breath that he forgets to let go of for a moment. Look on his face. There's this little smile playing around his lips, in his eyes, the slight furrow to his brows, like Harry's some kind of startling, remarkable surprise.
No, he says slowly. Of course not. I was upset that they thought that I might.
They look at each other for a long moment, standing there over the water. Draco's eyes are warm and watchful. They flick to Harry's mouth and then back again, and Harry thinks for a second that maybe it's all going to go a different way than he's expecting after all. Maybe it's not the most insane notion to ever cross his mind, the thought that he and Draco might be something, somehow. After all, it's not like Draco is a normal person. He's strange the way that Harry is strange, and also not at all the way that Harry is strange, in a way that is all his own. He likes Harry, doesn't he? as much as he likes anyone. He lets Harry come around. He shows Harry his private spaces. He talks to Harry, the endless way he talks to everyone, but the real way too, just sometimes, just lately. He's looking at Harry's mouth. Harry could take the risk, could lean forward right now with bird call and his own heartbeat loud in his ears. He could kiss Draco just to find out what would happen. He could see. He says, "Letting go isn't an area of strength for you, right?" And knows, as he does it, that it's a cowardice. It seems to break the spell. Draco jerks as if stung, though his voice is completely calm when he says, "The power of memory, at least you seem to have grasped. No, Potter, it's not." His eyes rove for a moment, a bit wildly, as if he's looking for something else to focus his attention on. They fix on the back over Harry's shoulder for the first time. "What you've got there?" "Oh," Harry says, remembering. "Right." He pulls their brooms out of the bag, his own from his apartment and Draco's from Creature, who helpfully informed him that Draco had 4 brooms, but would probably prefer this one, because the other 3 were fragile antiques behind glass cases, and Draco might kill Harry for looking at them wrong. "I just figured," Harry says, faltering at a total lack of expression on Draco's face. I mean, the other night I asked, and you didn't say no, so I just thought, well, maybe I'd see if you wanted to give it a go." He tosses Draco his broom, a little because Draco's gone all still and strange, and Harry wants to make sure he's not catatonic with delayed shock or something. He snaps out a hand to catch it, though seeker reflexes, Harry thinks, wondering why exactly that particular thought is such a punch to the chest, and then dismissing it because Draco is grinning at him. "You know?" "I say, is someone coming through the portal?" he says, and because he's a cheating little bastard and always has been, he throws himself into the air with a mad cackle at the minute Harry turns his head. "Race you, Potter!" "Race me to where?" Harry calls, already kicking off after him. Draco, hideous cheat that he is, doesn't answer, so Harry catches him up and then slides into the air beneath him, flips himself upside down so he can stare up at Draco, make sure their broomsticks are lined up. Harry can't win if he doesn't know where they're supposed to be going, but he can sure as fuck still tie. "You're mental," Draco calls down at him, laughing. "You'll knock your fool head off. Come back up and I'll tell you where we're racing to." "You will not," Harry calls back. Draco laughs again and then takes us straight up into the air, a winding, dizzying climb. Harry follows. Harry doesn't know how anyone could do anything else. He never does find out where that finish line was supposed to be. In the end, they mostly end up chasing each other around, each pulling out whatever tricks they've got to try and show the other up. Draco does an impression of Victor Crumb that's so absurd and over the top that Harry nearly falls off his broom laughing. And Harry tells Draco about the World Cup he went to with Ron and Seamus 3 years ago, shouts the story of how Seamus nearly threw over Dean for a leprechaun after a few meads too many through the rush of wind and speed. It's good. It's clean. It's fun. And when they touch down at last, they're both breathing heavily, grinning with delight. "This was a brilliant idea," Draco says, and then seeming to remember that it was Harry's, quickly adds, "Not that you're any less stupid in general, of course." "Oh, of course," Harry agrees mildly, rolling his eyes. What he wants is to draw Draco in by the lapels of his jacket, kiss his wind-chapped lips, long and desperate, and a little bit filthy against the wall of the bridge, but this is okay. This is nice. It's more than he can bear, just to be Draco's friend. It's more than he should have even expected, and he's grateful for it. He's sure he can figure out a way for it to be enough. They go home. They go back to Grimmauld Place, Harry reminds himself, for what feels like the 100th time. Draco says that he's starving, and won't it be tragic when the thieves come back and he's inconveniently already dead from malnutrition. Harry pulls a face at his histrionics, but heats him up a plate of "fuck you, Uncle Vernon" chicken, though he doesn't mention what he calls it when he places it in front of Draco on the table. After a long, slightly nerve-wracking moment of staring at it, Draco says faintly, "Is this coq au vin?" "Hell if I know," Harry says, shrugging as he drops into the chair across from him. "Could be, I suppose." Draco sniffs at it, pokes it with a fork, takes a bite. His eyes widen.
It is. Wait, Potter, you know how to make coq au vin, but you don't even know that it's called coq au vin?
Harry shrugs again. Oh, I guess. I don't know. It's just something my aunt used to have me make for dinner parties as a kid. I don't think I ever knew what it was called. The recipe kind of stuck with me, I suppose. Draco hums around a mouthful, an interested little noise. When he swallows, he says,
Did you cook a lot as a child?
Harry tenses up. There's no careful pity in Draco's voice, just curiosity. But yeah, Harry says, and surprises himself by adding as lightly as he can, it was kind of a don't cook, don't eat sort of situation. Oh, charming. Draco mutters, tone sharp with anger, but then changes tack so quickly Harry doesn't have time to feel. To feel however it was going to make him feel.
Oh, I just meant, did it start back then, was my question. Your whole bizarre secret food obsession, I mean.
It's not bizarre, Harry says, a little defensive. And it's not a secret, and no, not really. He's never really thought about it before, and his next words come out slow as he casts back in his memory. When I cooked as a child, I just did it because I was hungry mostly, or because I was told to. And I knew they'd take it out of me if I didn't. I never did it for fun or to make me happy or anything.
Does it now?
Draco's tone is casual, but gaze is probing, intense.
Make you happy, I mean.
Harry has to consider the question for a long time. Cooking's mostly just something he does. He's never really prodded himself an emotional reaction to it, or wondered all that much as to why. Everyone has to eat, and he's good at it, and there aren't any huge, horrific stakes on a sandwich or a pot of stew. No one ever prophesied that neither he nor the chicken stock could live while the other survived, and he likes that steady, reliable, never-waving nature of it all. It helps him think. It calms him. Yeah, he says eventually, and steals a mushroom from Draco's plate. Oh, I think so.
You think so?
Draco says, rolling his eyes.
Some days I genuinely wonder how you survive to adulthood, where you won't remain, Potter, by the way, if you don't leave my mushrooms alone.
Harry shrugs and maybe grins a little and sort of very slightly wishes Draco would kill him, because if he's fighting for his mushrooms, it means he likes what he's eating, and it makes Harry's chest hurt, which is pathetic and also horrible. He backs off, though, lets Draco finish his dinner, and is just about ready to get up from the table and consider the possibility of going back to bed when Draco clears his throat.
I asked for coq au vin every year on my birthday, from ages 6 to 16.
Draco says, eyes on his empty plate, so quietly that Harry almost doesn't hear him.
I haven't had it since the war. I thought, I don't know what I thought.
He looks up at Harry just for a second, this flash of eye contact there and gone again, and Harry's heart breaks a little when he smiles down at his plate.
It's really good. I'd forgotten.
Harry says, hopelessly overfull of 1,000 things, but not one of them something to say. That clearly meant something to Draco. It meant something to Harry. Not that he could begin to explain even to himself what or why. Still, despite that, or perhaps because of it, the only thing he can manage to walk out of his mouth is, I call it, fuck you, Uncle Vernon chicken, actually, because my Uncle Vernon never liked it very much. Draco lifts his head to stare for a second, but then he laughs, shaking his head.
You are really a very strange man, aren't you, Harry?
Like you'll want to talk, Harry says, good-naturedly enough.
Oh, I know that I'm strange, Draco agrees. I've probably known that as long as I've known anything but from you.
He pauses, shrugs, smiles down at his plate again.
From you, it's a constant surprise.
Harry goes to bed that night thinking of the look on his face, the warmth in his voice, all these little ways it turns out they intersect perfectly, without intersecting at all. Maybe it's not such a workable problem being in love with Draco. Maybe Harry's been doomed all along. To be continued. Thank you for listening to What We Pretend We Can't See by Gyzym, read by Alex Mabella. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, AO3 or Spotify.